adapted title is Understanding and Ministry with Gen Z. So I am the Reverend Dr. Rachel Christine Hébert. I've had the privilege of working with college students since about 2011, when I served as the University Ministries intern at the University of Tulsa and First Presbyterian Church of Tulsa. I started up and failed at a campus ministry while interning at Fifth Avenue Presbyterian Church in New York City. And I poured hundreds of hours of time and energy into working with college students while I served at Williamsburg Presbyterian Church in Williamsburg, Virginia. I am the baby pastor on staff at Shadyside Presbyterian Church. I just started July 1st. So I want to start us by grounding us in these post-high school students by examining their generation, which is Gen Z. I've been in a cohort held through our denomination on campus ministry, and we have been taking an extensive look at various resources the denomination has published and provided through the UKirk network. Has anyone heard of UKirk before? Wonderful. So UKirk, U stands for university, and Kirk is the Scottish word for church. UKirk is the PCUSA branding for campus ministry. The statistics I'm going to be providing come from this cohort that I'm part of, and additional information and ideas are a combination of what I've seen work with campus ministry and post-high school life and what the UKirk network suggests. So let's dive in. So I want to ground us in some statistics, not because I want to bash on a generation, but because I think we need a general foundation and level of understanding of who is Gen Z. So they are generally considered to be those born between the mid to late 1990s and early 2010s. Most members of Gen Z are children of Gen X or younger baby boomers. As the first social generation to have grown up with access to the internet and portable digital technology from a young age, Gen Z, if not necessarily digitally literate, have been dubbed digital natives. They were shaped by the Great Recession of 2007 to 2009 and the COVID-19 pandemic. They grew up in the era of the iPhone, which debuted back in 2007, and of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, a governmental department founded in 2002 after the September 11th attacks that most of them are too young to remember. Because of this, early names for Gen Z included the I generation or Homelanders. In their early years, they witnessed significant social changes, such as the election of the first Black U.S. president and the legalization of same-sex marriage. In general, they are the most diverse generation of Americans to date in a variety of demographics. Nearly 50% are racially and ethnically minorities. They are more likely than previous generations to have at least one foreign-born parent. They have grown up in more diverse settings than previous generations and have higher percentages of single-parent families, mixed-race families, and LGBTQIA+ parents in legally recognized partnerships. In fact, 16% identify as part of the LGBTQIA+ community themselves, more than any previous generation. They are also shifting gender norms more than any previous generation, with more than half of them saying forms and profiles should allow for sex or gender options other than man and woman, therefore using pronouns. They are highly connected, but they crave in-person, face-to-face relationships. They value relationships. However, due to the pandemic, they do not have the skills for building healthy relationships offline. They lack some basic life skills, writing a check, balancing a checkbook, cooking. There are no more typing or keyboard classes offered in high school, and they are no longer taught to write in cursive. This is also a generation that is not pushed to attend college. Life experience counts, trade schools, taking a year off, joining the military. They have an array of role models of entrepreneurs that do not have college degrees. And in the West, Gen Z is the least religious generation in history. More members describe themselves as non-believers than any previous generation and reject religious affiliation, though many describe themselves as spiritual. It's those last two statistics, that I really want to hone in on most in our time together tonight, that this is a generation that is not being pushed to attend college, and that in the West, it is seen as the least religious generation in history. So what can our churches do? What on earth do we have to offer in the face of such statistics? I think the answer is we have an abundance of resources that we can offer, time and energy. So let me add on a second layer here for us. We need to remember 4 callings that we have as the church. First, we must remember the baptismal vows we made for these young adults. Those vows do not stop when they graduate from high school, but continue on into their young adult years. Second, we need to learn to re-adopt a new understanding of the word evangelism. Evangelism in the biblical sense is not about converting people to a set of beliefs about Jesus, but presenting and inviting people into an alternative and liberating way of being in the world with our neighbors. Yes, there is still a call to share the good news with students, but it is also inviting those who were raised in the church into an alternative and liberating way of following Jesus and being in the world with all of our neighbors. Third, we need to ask ourselves, how are we called to love our neighbor in ways that are meaningful to them spiritually, emotionally, intellectually, and economically? When people of faith demonstrate that following Christ includes tangible care for the other, they are offering a witness to the world that God's love extends to all people. And finally, spiritual formation of younger adults takes greater intentionality, time, creativity, patience, and the ability to listen and learn from young adults. Post-high school students are bombarded by demands on their time and attention, yet they also crave authentic communities of faith where they are invited to experience God's love. So for my doctoral project, I focused on the question, what is authentic community? And I explored this question by interviewing the college students that I was working with and fellow congregation members. And they came to a consensus. There were 3 guiding principles for authentic communities. First, it's a group of people brought together by a common belief. Second, it is a space that is safe or brave or equitable, where people have a sense of belonging. And finally, where people are given the opportunity to both speak up and intentionally listen to others. So my project focused on bringing together college students and congregation members in a small group Bible study setting to see if I could ultimately cultivate an authentic faith community. Now, we only met once a month for 4 months, so the seeds were planted, but I'm convinced if I had had more time, an authentic community truly would have been formed. Because this intentional gathering together of students with adults was deeply meaningful to both groups of people. There is something to be said about intergenerational ministry and its power, but I don't want to step on Carolyn's toes with her presentation next on intergenerational ministry. I will say that if your church has young adults, the answer is not necessarily starting up a young adult ministry, but instead finding ways to connect them with congregation members. So at Williamsburg Presbyterian Church, one such way we promoted such connections was to form affinity groups. These groups met up once a week or once a month surrounding a particular issue: a mental health support group, LGBTQIA support group, Earth Care congregation team, racial justice team, just to name a few. These groups needed a facilitator, not a pastor, a facilitator, who brings questions to help guide the dialogue for the group. These groups also do not have to be explicitly Christian and can instead provide a space for young adults in the community to come and find a safe space to discuss issues that they are passionate about. Affinity groups touches on Gen Z's need to embrace diversity and champion inclusivity, and provides that space for an authentic community to form, coming together around a particular belief, having a sense of belonging, and where people can be heard or listened to. And these do not have to be large groups. Remember that where 2 or 3 are gathered, Christ is there also. There's also the power of mentorships that can be formed intentionally between a post-high school student and a congregation member. One such way to cultivate these relationships with post-high school students is to develop what I stole from Tulsa and implemented in Williamsburg, and we'll implement at Shadyside eventually, is a Second Families program. This is an intentional matching of a congregation member with a student based around shared interests, hobbies, you name it. You do a matching process between them. It's kind of like, okay, it's not like online dating. But there is like this matching algorithm that you like do to place them and match them together. This can be a single person from your congregation. It can be a couple. It can be a family who's matched with a student. And the two covenant to pray for each other and to meet up with one another once a month over the span of either the academic year or if they're living there full time, the entire year together. And these relationships can be so powerful and long lasting. I've had numerous connections between congregation members and college students that lasted way beyond their college years. Now, should you have a handful of post-high school students, then yeah, sure, start up a young adult group. Discuss the hard questions about life, faith, advocacy work, and social justice. The more authentic the questions and responses, the more they will come to trust you and the church. And remember, your job is not to provide the answers, but the information. Lay out the information for them and let them begin to articulate what they think and what they believe. And if at all possible, have food. These students love to eat. So I want to shift now to some simple steps to take for whenever we're sending our own students out into the world. And this is going to entail some research on your part, but I promise I think it's going to be worth it in the long run. So first, wherever they are going, try to see if there is a UKirk collegiate ministry. Again, UKirk is the PCUSA branding for campus ministry. You can go online to ukirk.org and look up a campus ministry. And I guarantee you that 9 times out of 10, a campus ministry will gladly take a student who is not enrolled at the institution, but is in the age range of a collegiate ministry. If the city or school does not have a UKirk campus ministry, start researching other PCUSA churches in the area and see what they have to offer. Be willing to reach out to other churches and inquire for the student what the church might offer for them. If there is no UKirk campus ministry and no PCUSA church that would offer a space of belonging for a student, then look at some of the other campus ministries being offered nearby. Some trusted campus ministries that fall within some of our mainline denominations are Wesley campus ministries, like that the Methodists oftentimes provide, Lutheran Student Association, and Episcopal or Canterbury churches. I will say, I know that we have a very diverse presbytery, and I love that about this presbytery. You know your students best. You know where they stand theologically, and you know what kind of group they're most going to need. So the majority of popular campus ministries right now tend to be theologically right of center. So if your student is more center or right-leaning, then by all means, please encourage them to attend InterVarsity or Young Life, Chi Alpha, or Cru. And please know that I'm just speaking from my experience from the College of William and Mary. But I will say that UKirk Williamsburg picked up a handful of students who were no longer satisfied with other campus ministries because they found them to be too dogmatic and rigid in their thought and theology. John Westerhoff said, "Every generation is in the process of questioning, borrowing, and owning their faith. At every stage, you're questioning, borrowing, and owning, and then something changes and the cycle begins again." We need to understand that Gen Z is in just such a process of questioning, borrowing, and owning their faith. They're going to lean more towards being classified as spiritual but not religious, because while they do believe there is something out there to follow, they question why they must follow a certain orthodoxy or dogma, and why they need to believe what one church believes instead of another. They are also more likely to not do what previous generations have done, leave the church and then come back to the church. So if you have a Gen Zer in your space, they are choosing to be in your space, and we cannot take that for granted. We need to grant them the space that we were granted at their age, the space to question, borrow, and own their faith. By providing resources such as affinity groups, mentorships, and small groups, we can empower this generation of young people to own their faith and be prepared for the next phase of their journey. That's all I've got. Thank you. Yeah.
Can you say quickly, sorry, the 3 things that make up for authentic community again?
Yeah, a sense of, let me look at my notes. I should know this off the top of my head.
All right, one I have. Common beliefs is one I have.
A group of people brought together by a common belief.
Okay.
A space that is safe or brave or equitable where people have a sense of belonging.
Okay.
And then this third one is where they can be heard and a space in which intentional listening can take place.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much.